Well, hello everyone. I hope you can hear me. My name is Peter Farkas, and I'm the CEO of Percona a month ago. And I was also, or I am the CEO and co-founder of FerretDB. I'm not sure if you've heard about it. If you did, raise your hands. Okay, at least a couple of people. Has anyone heard about Percona? Okay, quite a lot of people as well. So I have 15 minutes for a presentation that's usually about an hour. I have all the slides, so you can download it later and look at it. I will quickly go through some things here I wanted to mention, and then feel free to ask questions outside after the talk, because if we do questions here as well, then I guess I will have about 5 minutes for the whole thing. So the reason I'm here today is because I want to raise awareness to something which is surprisingly not well known in the database world. Any MongoDB users here? Postgres users? Okay, so I guess you're wondering why the hell I'm going to talk about MongoDB at all on the Free Software Conference, and the question is actually correct. So the reason why we care about MongoDB is because if you look at this graph, this is the Stack Exchange Developer Survey of 2024. Maybe there's a newer one, I'm not sure. The question was, which database do you want to work with in the next year or so? What do you want to learn? What do you want to use? And of course, Postgres is the number one. Second is MySQL. Then SQLite, MongoDB, and Microsoft SQL Server for whatever odd reason. And the outlier here, I'm not going to ask the question because I think you figured it out already, is MongoDB. Why? Because MongoDB, if you take a look at this list, MongoDB is proprietary, but SQL Server is also proprietary. However, MongoDB is the only document database which is most popular in its category, and it is proprietary, unlike Postgres. So if you want to use a relational database, you have lots of free software choices. You have great things going on, whether you're a Postgres or MySQL person. But if you're into document databases, you have MongoDB as the easy-to-use one and the popular one. And that's when some people would ask me, okay, but isn't MongoDB open source? Well, it was, but it's not open source anymore. The SSPL license is not an open source license. It's also not proprietary. Some call it source available. Raise your hand if you've heard about the source available community. Guys, okay, well, I think that's bullshit. But anyway, the SSPL license is not open source, and there's lots of material on that on some websites like ssplisbad.com. But the essence of the problem is that if you want to use MongoDB as a service, then you need to pay a license fee to MongoDB, or you need to release your code, your entire stack running MongoDB as a service under the SSPL license. The reason why this is bad is because when you think about Postgres or when you think about MySQL, if you want to use a hosted database as a service solution, anybody can run that. You have lots of services to choose from. When it comes to MongoDB, only those service providers can run MongoDB who pay the license fee, meaning that you will have less options. So there's nothing wrong with using database as a service. The problem is when you can only get that from certain providers who are in a business relationship with MongoDB, because in that case, your costs are going to be higher than in a market with actual competition. So Postgres people, why don't you just use Postgres, right? I mean, that's a question anybody would ask before this presentation. And the thing is, there are lots of happy MongoDB users, and there are lots of frameworks requiring MongoDB. So all in all, in history of IT, it never really worked to basically require people to use technologies they don't want to use. If they don't want to learn relational databases, if they don't want to learn Postgres, but they like MongoDB, then the best path is MongoDB. I have 9 minutes left, so I'm going to go very quickly here to tell you about the story of SQL and how this is related to the situation with document databases. So there was this guy, Ted Codd, who invented the relational model, tables, and everything else that comes with it. He had a profound effect on the database community with this invention. However, it was insanely hard to use it. So SQL came after the invention of the relational model by these two individuals who said, okay, we like the relational database concept, but we don't want to interact with it using program code that was running on IBM machines in the 70s. So they invented the SQL query language, and that is the English-like interface for relational database. It's very easy to use. However, if you wanted to use SQL or a relational database, you had to lease one of these washing machine-sized computers from IBM. You had to lease somebody else's computer to use one product that you liked. So if you liked SQL, then your only option was IBM. And then a couple of years later, other vendors started implementing the relational model. By the 80s, there were many alternatives on the market, but none of them were really compatible with each other. Why? Because they did not rely on an open standard, which would tell you how to implement SQL across many different products to make it compatible with each other or to follow the same direction. So in the end of 80s, SQL became an open standard, and that's when open source alternatives appeared on the market, like Postgres or MySQL, SQLite, and hundreds of derivatives of that. So only when SQL became an open standard and there was an actual document which everybody accepted that discussed how to implement SQL as a language, that's when the alternatives really appeared and became very strong on the market and became strong alternatives to IBM's DB2. And the reason why I'm here today is because I want to point out that MongoDB started the same way as SQL, where someone promised a new model and a new way of interacting with your database, which is supposedly easier than before. And it launched as an open source product, and it achieved market dominance by 2018. And then MongoDB decided to pull the rug from under all of their users who cared about open source and brought it under the SSPL license, effectively controlling the entire market and the costs of running MongoDB at scale. And if you think back on the SQL-related slide, this is a very familiar situation where we have alternatives on the market, like Azure Cosmos DB for MongoDB, Amazon Document DB, Huawei's Gauss DB, and some others, but there's no open standard which would describe how the MongoDB query language should look like. So if you start using one, it's very, very hard for you to migrate to something else. It's a different feature set. There's a different degree of compatibility between them, and they are mostly tied to cloud vendors. So after all, you need to lease someone else's computer to run the product, like in the 70s. Interesting, right? And of course, for a MongoDB alternative, MongoDB sets the pace. So if they deprecate a feature, if they add the feature, then the alternatives need to follow that. I think this is a very familiar problem in open source in general. So the point I wanted to make today is that I do think that we are in need of an open standard for the MongoDB query language. There are lots of MongoDB users out there, and they are logged into solutions today which resembles the state of how the relational database market looked like in the 80s, and we can't even imagine how that would work if we would not have an open standard for SQL. So the MongoDB query language as an open standard could look like a JSON query language. It could be extended at the expense of portability, of course. And there is an overwhelming interest from all sorts of different vendors to make this happen. But to make this happen, we need to raise awareness. This is why I'm here today. And to make this happen, we also need to get together the community, the current vendors, and maybe even MongoDB. Hello, MongoDB. To make sure that that the standard is going to work across many different vendors and technologies. MongoDB does not like this currently. We created FerretDB, that is a MongoDB compatibility layer. It uses the Microsoft Document DB Postgres extension. So for Postgres users, the essence of today's talk is that you can turn Postgres into MongoDB for your internal MongoDB users. It offers a degree of compatibility with MongoDB itself, and that is a first step towards making sure that there will be alternatives on the market. We worked together with Microsoft to release this as FerretDB 2.0. They also have their own solutions, so I would highly recommend you to take a look into the DocumentDB extension if you have MongoDB and Postgres workloads in the same organization, because that could be an interesting alternative to you. MongoDB sued us in the Delaware court as a result. They don't like this thing. Well, I think I understand why, because this is breaking the vendor lock-in they carefully planned for their users, in my opinion. MongoDB compatibility, just so everyone is on the same page, means that the existing tools for MongoDB can be used with Postgres, meaning that you can have MongoDB Compass, for example, connect to a Postgres database running the compatibility layer and the extension, and you can manage your MongoDB database without the tool ever knowing that it's running on Postgres. Look at this slide if you're interested in how this looks like from a licensing standpoint. Basically, we take the Apache 2.0 drivers and have them connect to FerretDB, and FerretDB interacts with Postgres, emulating the API. So that's how you get an alternative for MongoDB. So I'm not going to take questions because we have exactly 1 minute left, but I wanted to thank you for your attention. I recommend you to look into documentdb.io for the DocumentDB Postgres extension, or ferretdb.com. And if you are interested in MongoDB-related services, then I would also recommend visiting percona.com. Thank you very much for your attention.